15 seconds, another person experiences sexual assault, and 4 out of 5 victims do not report the incident.
Hello, I'm Gabe Myers.
And I'm Javana Hosein.
I'm Madison Smith.
And I'm Ramos.
April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Here at Sam Houston State University, we have a few events throughout the month that will bring light to this topic. A few of them include Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, Let's Talk About Consent, and recently coming up, Denim Day. Denim Day is based off of the Italian Supreme Court case that overturned a rape conviction because they said that it was justified because her denim jeans were so tight that she must have helped take them off. That equals consent. So what is consent to you all?
So to me, consent is pretty point blank. It's a yes. It's not an implied yes. It's a yes.
It's not a, I would guess not, but maybe. It's not a maybe.
It's not like she didn't say no.
It's yes.
Yes.
Consent is, consent is not saying no, and that's what a lot of people get confused about when talking about it. A lot of people think, oh, she doesn't object to it, then
She must want
she's
it.
okay with it, but that's not always the case, as we've come to find out now in today's culture.
And you're allowed to change your mind. Just because you've implied that you want to be in the position that you're in and the situation doesn't mean that you're forced to finish any acts that you don't want to. You can't stop if you're not comfortable.
Yeah, believe it or not, you're 100% in control, and you can say, stop, I don't want this, no.
So I've been in situations where people have been respectful about it and other situations where people aren't respectful about it. And I personally think everyone needs to find the respectful way of taking it. When someone doesn't want to continue to be in a situation, you can't force them to be in something that they don't want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you all think about it only being brought up when you're about to have sex? Is it always a sexual thing, like we are going to have sex? Can it be anywhere?
It can, because, I know this is all about sexual awareness and whatever, but like if you're out with your friends at the club or something and you're dancing with your friends and you have no interest on dancing with any other guys will come up to you and, ask you if you want to dance. And even if you say no, they're like, come on, like, it's no big deal, like, just dance with me. And they'll continue to try to dance on you. And at the same time, they need to understand that, no, I don't want to dance with you. Just move on.
Yeah, there's a point where a lot of guys are, for lack of a better word, persistent with it and just keep going even after you say no, like, oh, come on, like, let's do this. You don't have to be like that or whatever.
You're so uptight. And then they want to start calling you names and stuff.
And at what point does it become harassment, from
And
you guys'
that's
perspective?
something that as a society we need to figure out, what point is it harassment, because we can't just say that and then not give them a point. Are you going to dance with them one dance and then go? Or I say no? What point is it actually a chase? That's something as a society I think we do need to figure out, what point does it cross the line.
No, and that is a good point, because it's kind of a gray area. It's hard because not every situation is the same. So
Absolutely.
You can't just say, oh, at this point it's, or in this situation it's absolutely harassment, because it may or may not be. And just with all the situations that are brought up, you can't say definitively for every situation what is and what isn't. And you may not always know if you're in one of those situations as it's happening.
Actually, I personally think, tying that a little bit back into consent, that whether it's harassment or not, completely 100% has to do with the person that it's happening to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're the one that chooses if they're comfortable with this, if this is something that they want to be in. And I guess that's where personally I draw the line between what's harassment and what's them being, pestering you. So it's like up to you. You decide. If someone's harassing you, you're the only one that gets to say, okay, they're harassing me.
You can agree to a dance with a guy. You can agree, but maybe he's touching too much, fondling and pulling closer too much, and you feel uncomfortable. It's 100% your decision to say, I don't want this anymore, I think I'm good, thanks, and just move on. And he should be able to understand that.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, it's 100% whether you're comfortable or not. If you were comfortable in the situation or not anymore, it's your right to get out of that situation, and whether that's okay or not with your partner. That's the way it has to be in society now.
Piggybacking a little bit off of what Gabriel said, what should you say that says, this is not a game anymore, I want you to stop. It's harassment now, I'm not uncomfortable with this, you're making me feel weird.
And that's when the warning signs could go off, yelling, being, I don't want to say violent, but being maybe a little counter-aggressive with him or her and saying, you know, like, please get off of me, like, this is not okay. If he or she were to be pushing up against you, I think you can start getting, not violent, but, you know, a little aggressive.
Making your point.
Making your
very
point,
known.
yeah. Standing up for yourself.
Now, to the counter argument of that, 50% of college students' sexual assault includes alcohol. And 81% of those, both the perpetrator and the victim, have been consuming alcohol. What do you think about that? Because, I mean, you're both drunk. How does that tie in with consent? Because you could say that I did not consent, but you could also say that it wasn't him
It
or
was-
her,
yeah.
it was the alcohol.
When you drink alcohol, you're making that conscious decision to drink alcohol, and you are still responsible for your actions when you're drunk, even if you can't remember it the next day. What you do when you're drunk, even whether you can remember it or not, that you're responsible for that. Like if you get in a car and drive when you're drunk, that's your responsibility. So in this situation, the same logic applies.
Yeah. To both the victim and the perpetrator, like when you drink alcohol, you're more vulnerable to assault, but I think there comes a time where when you know something is wrong, like I was telling them earlier, your gut instinct, like you need to trust your gut instincts, and you are probably under the influence, but I think there is a line where you should know like that this is wrong, and you can say no.
Absolutely. And I feel like people want to think that most sexual abuse happens when both people are drunk, but 74% of perpetrators are drunk when they are doing the sexual abuse, whereas 55% of victims are actually under alcoholic abuse. So what do you think about that? Because it seems to me that less victims are and it's more the perpetrators. Is it something that just goes through your head?
I wanted to say something about being a drunk victim. If you're a drunk victim, it's not your fault because there's just sometimes you're incapacitated and you can't say no, and that ties us back into the fact that not getting a no doesn't mean that's a yes.
Mm-hmm.
So just because someone's drunk and hasn't physically, if someone's drunk, don't have sex with them. Like that's a safe line if it's a questionable situation. If someone's drunk, just don't have sex because they might not be wanting this, but they might not be able to say no. And you might not be wanting this, and you might not be able to say no. So I think it's safer to just assume that, like,
Assume no.
Assume
yeah.
no.
Oh yeah,
Definite-
Yeah.
if it's not a
Assume-
definite yes,
it's a no until it's a yes.
yeah.
But I'm saying like there's a point where you can tell also like, because I mean honestly, you're never in a situation and you're like, hold up, stop everything. Do you give consent? Like it's never like
It's never
It's
like
never exactly
But-
like that, but it should be more like
It
that.
should.
It should be,
Like, yeah.
is this 100%
If
okay?
anything,
Yeah.
we were talking about earlier, like elsewhere, about how we live in a hookup culture kind of thing, and everything is set like based on sex.
Sex everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the hookup culture and the college atmosphere, does that change it a little bit? Because it used to be, she's not my girlfriend, I haven't asked her out, then it's not going to happen. With this hookup culture, everybody you meet is possibly a potential hookup. What do you think about that? Does that change anything? How do you know then? Because you're not dating, but it could mean consent still.
No. Like you're not dating, so you're not courting each other. So why is that consent? Like you don't even know this person, but just because it's alive and well on the campus and everyone's doing it, that doesn't mean anything for you. Just because you know her at a party, you might have a class with her, doesn't mean that you can just go and hook up with her just because everyone else is doing it and it's around the campus.
And consent is also an in-the-moment decision. It's not something made, the day of or the week before, when you wake up in the morning. It's an in-the-moment decision. It's not something that in all cases are premeditated. So you can't just go around and say, oh, she's a potential sexual partner or something like that, and it's consensual because that's the culture we live in. It's an in-the-moment decision. It's not something that you can decide the week before.
At the same time with that, that's when rumors come into play too. Like let's say a group of guys knows that this one girl is known to sleep around a lot, but they don't know that she consents every time. She probably says, yeah, I do, and that she has a lot of sexual partners, but they don't think that. they think that she's just easy. And so he's like, you know what? Let's like picture this like the first day of class, and this guy sees a girl in his class, and he's like, oh wow, it's that girl who blah blah blah, you know? And then he's like, I bet you I can hit that, or something like that. And then he goes to a party and he sees her and he thinks he can do that. And then that's when that comes into play too, and he'll force himself onto her.
Well, yeah, one of the things we were talking about just before is it's a no until it's a yes. Like until it's, until consent, until they actually give consent, you really just have to assume it's a no. That's
But sadly, guys don't.
That's not
the case.
Most of the time.
The whole rape culture thing. How right now, women are kind of put in this place where they're constantly being looked at like sexual objects. Even when they're not in any way like, even if they are, even if you're wearing like a bikini to class, like the rape culture has made that so that that's like you asking for it. And that's not true. No one's ever asking. Yeah, clothes are not consent. No one's ever asking for rape.
Yeah, no, and also like kind of tying it back to that Italian case where she was wearing really tight jeans, so she must have given consent because she must have taken off. Just for example, if I'm somewhere and I like have my shirt off, doesn't mean I'm looking for. That doesn't mean I give consent.
Absolutely.
Or if you go to somewhere and you're wearing like a bikini or something like that, or wearing a swimsuit, that doesn't mean you're giving consent.
Absolutely. Now you said something a little interesting a few moments ago. You said about it's a spontaneous thing, it happens the moment with consent. But is it still considered sexual assault if the person consented at that time but wakes up and realizes they did not want to? Because that ties into false rape claims. When does it become a false rape claim? Is that a false rape claim because you said yes at that time and now you wake up and said you didn't want to, or that's just a bad mistake?
That's a sticky situation. I would say if you're in any way under the influence and you're thinking yes at that time and then the next morning there's regret, then maybe there's something there. But if you're like just completely sober and at the time you say yes and the next day you don't, you regret it. I think that's just regret in that sense.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's...
Because it happens. Not everything is sexual assault. Sometimes you just make a bad decision.
Yeah, sometimes you just wake up in the morning, you're like, I shouldn't have done that.
But that's the choice of the victim.
Absolutely.
Or just the person, sorry to call them victim. But that's not something that someone else is going to tell you. If you have been sexually assaulted, you were the one that chooses that, not someone else. The law doesn't choose that, you choose that.
Absolutely. And I think it's important that people do figure that out. And with the victim thing, or I don't want to call them a victim, the person that had to experience this, there's also a culture right now that we're not believing them. And I think personally that you should believe what you say. I mean, when you wake up afterwards and you were completely sober, nothing was happening, you made a mistake and you regret it, that's one thing. But if you feel like you have been abused, I don't think that people should try to invalidate what you say. Like you said, that is a choice of the victim or the person it happened to. What do you all think about that?
That's honestly heartbreaking for you or someone to go through that trauma just for someone else of authority, or maybe even your closest friends or anybody, your peers, to tell you that you weren't raped or you weren't assaulted. That's heartbreaking because that's just traumatic. Like that person has PTSD now, and they can't get that back. So for someone to invalidate them, that's heartbreaking.
And also the other thing is bringing it back to the original scenario where if you wake up the next morning and you regret it, also like in the moment when it was happening, were you thinking what you were thinking that morning? Because if that's the case, then you could. Then again, that could be, sexual assault. But I'm kind of tying it back. If it's just something that happened the night before and you wake up the next morning and it's something that you just regret, then it's not sexual assault. And I think that might be what ties into a lot of the false rape claims.
The fact that you know what happened and you're like regretting it, is that what differentiates that? If you wake up and you're like, I don't know what happened, but I'm pretty sure I was forced to do something that I didn't want to do, then that's when you know. But if you wake up and you're talking and you're just like, oh my goodness, like I think
it was like I made a mistake
and I really didn't want to do that with that person, then it's it could be claimed as a mistake.
That's a bad decision. That's not sexual assault.
And why do you think so many authority figures do not believe or do not want to believe victims? Do you think that's why? Do you think they're waking up and thinking they just made a mistake? Why?
I just
do
don't
they not
think
know
they
that
don't want to
line?
believe the crime happened.
No, because in
That's a lot of
this generation, a lot of the older people think that we want attention all the time and that we always need to be out there and we need to spill our business everywhere. So now that we're saying something so not crazy, but so out there, they think we're just trying to do it for attention.
I also think that the authority are technically in place to protect us a lot of the time. And when things like this happen, for example, like on a college campus, that means there was a flaw somewhere. And the person wasn't protected by the authority. They, like, a predator, like, got to them. Because we talk about rape, like, it does happen between people our age, but, there are other rapists that are, like, the stereotypical, like, predators. And whenever that happens, it's almost like they probably feel guilty that they couldn't protect us. Because they were there to, be the authority and, like, protect you, and they couldn't do it. So they're probably guilty, and they don't want to believe it. They just want to make you look like the dramatic one.
I also think they just don't want to believe it could happen to their watch, like under their nose.
Yeah.
I think that's another big part of it, where it's like, well, are you sure? Like, I don't think
Yeah.
that would happen. Like, it's like, oh, you hear about it, but I don't think that wouldn't happen here.
That wouldn't happen on this
Yeah,
campus.
that wouldn't
like,
happen here. And like, you just never know in that scenario. I think if someone comes to you with a sexual assault claim, you have to take them at their word for it. It's,
Absolutely.
that's
The-
my belief.
the number
That-
one
that's
thing-
serious.
after that is to just help the person. Just
Absolutely.
no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
And
You just
just like a general person, like, if you are hearing this from, like, a story, I guess, because that happens when you're in school, someone's like, oh, this girl got assaulted, you're not the one to be like, I don't believe that. Like, no, that's not your say. Your opinion is not what counts.
Yes, and it's very important that we should say, according to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, the false claim reports are from 2 to 10%. That is not a lot of people that are doing false claims. So I think that's very important to realize that a lot of these claims, most of these claims, are very true and very real. They might not be the most extreme case, but that does not mean that they did not go through something, and we should listen. I think it's very important that people know there are many places that you can get help for this, and that we encourage you to get help at. We have places in Huntsville, we have places in Houston, and we have places at the national level for both men and women. Some of those places in Huntsville include Safe House, the Crisis Intervention, and Support and Services Empowering Survivors. In Houston, we have places like the Houston Area Women's Center, but that is not limiting anywhere else. And we also have the national hotline that we will put at the end of this video. It is anonymous, and it is just a place that you can get your story out, to get it off your chest, because nothing is worse than having a secret that you cannot get out. So I encourage you to call if you feel the need to.
Just the fact that you're getting your story out there and someone is hearing it, and you can choose to remain anonymous, if you want to tell your story and tell who you are to get more help, and so be it. Go ahead and do that. And then there are people out there, there are tons of people out there that are willing to help. You just got to make that phone call and get a right group of friends.
It's important for you to make sure you have a good support system, people that you can confide in, and people who aren't going to question you about, like, if you come to them, they're not going to be like, they're not going to not believe you. Just good friends. Just get good friends.
If you have somebody you just want to talk to, I definitely encourage you to call the national hotline. It is anonymous, and it's just